Today's episode of This Week in Startups is brought to you by Citrix Sharefile, secure file transfer built for business. Visit sharefile.com, click on the microphone, and enter TWIST for a free 30-day trial. And by Squarespace, an all-in-one platform that makes it fast and easy to create a professional website and now an online store. For a free trial and 10% off your first purchase on new accounts, go to squarespace.com and use the offer code TWIST. And by AWS Activate, the Amazon Web Services Startup Program. It's easy to start and scale your business with AWS. Visit aws.amazon.com/activate.
Hey everybody, it's Jason Calacanis. Today on the program, the founder of the Muse, which is an amazing site for recruiting the top-level talent in the world to your startup. It's a great YC company that's raised over $2 million and has some of the top clients in the world, Gucci, Uber, and many others. It's a fascinating interview with a female founder, by the way, who talks a lot about being a female founder, going through Y Combinator, and just raising money. It's a fascinating discussion. It's a great company. You're going to love this episode. Stick with us.
That's what it's all about, man. They said money is the root of all evil. What? Funny how it feeds my people. We ain't gonna live like equals until we get the money, spend the money, and defeat you. Yeah, money is the root of all evil. What? Funny how it feeds my people. Yeah, we ain't gonna live like equals until we get the money, spend the money, and defeat you.
Hey everybody, welcome to This Week in Startups. I'm your host, Jason Calacanis. You can follow me on the Twitter at Jason, and you can follow the show at TWI Startups. Thanks again to our friends at WeWork. I'm here at WeWork Empire State in Midtown Manhattan, which is a super cool place for you to get a desk for an affordable price and not have to sign a ridiculous lease, which is a super bummer if you're a startup. Like, you want to control your costs and pay as you go, and my gosh, what a great service they provide. And they have good coffee, which is, of course, the most important thing. And you know what? They're not cheap. That's what I like. I mean, the price is affordable. But you know they have the Ronnie Brook Farms milk here, Jacob? I'm talking to our engineer, Jacob. Like, the Ronnie Brook Farms milk is like the best milk you can get. I used to pay like $3 or $4 to get like a quart of that when I lived in New York. And they have it here in the refrigerator for free, which is amazing. I put 2 in my bag. No, I don't recommend you do that. But really, the WeWork team is amazing. I put 4 in my bag. WeWork.com. They're in New York, San Francisco, Boston. And I work out of their San Francisco office at the WeWork. What do they call that one? In
Golden Gate?
Golden Gate. That's right. WeWork Golden Gate, yes. All right, listen, if you love the show, and I'm sure you do, if you're listening, go to twistlist.co, and you can join the secret back channel. All right, today on the program, a YC alum is with us with a really great idea on how to get people to join companies. It's called The Muse, and her name is Kathryn Minshew. And Kathryn, the most terrifying moment for every founder, describe what you're doing in a sentence.
It's
brutal,
people,
right?
It's the most. So we help people figure out what they want to do with their lives through great career advice, photo and video profiles that take you behind the scenes of companies like Facebook, Uber, Gucci, and job opportunities.
Got it. So you provide this as like a software as a service or like video as a service to companies?
So there's a web destination, themuse.com, that's visited by about 1.5 million people a month. So cool. 70 to 100,000 people probably came today. And, we work with companies on the back end who are trying to hire. Specifically, a lot of tech companies, a lot of really innovative companies. They obviously, they can post their jobs on, Craigslist or Monster, but they're not going to get the type of people they want, which is why they come to us.
And the type of people you provide are what? More career-oriented people?
Yeah, I think when you look at really good people, they have a lot of options. And so how are they going to decide between those options? They want to know, what is it like to work at this company versus that company? It's things like company culture. Who are the people who work there? How will I fit into the broader team? And it's really hard to get that if you just have, a logo and 5 paragraphs of text. So we essentially, send a video camera into the companies and we say, here are employees talking about what they did today, a project they worked on. Here's the office. Here's the traditions that they have. And it lets people really self-select and say, that looks like a place I want to join, or I don't think that company's for me. And that's okay, because a company can be a great fit for one person and a really terrible place for another.
Is video the key innovation then? Because you can't really lie in a video, right? Or I guess you can, but it's harder. When people write, we are a great place to work. We have a great culture. We have organic food for lunch and great coffee and Ronnie Brooks Farm milk. Like everybody knows to put that like boilerplate in.
Yeah.
But actually having a great culture, like when you videotape somebody who's an employee or a team member, like, and you ask them what's it like to work here, if they're lying, you can kind of tell. Right?
I was going to say, it makes people be more truthful, but it's also just more specific. Like anyone can say, we're a really innovative place to work, but you might have one person who says, we work hard, we love it here, we're a great place to work, no, people don't ask stupid questions, we're just all in it together. And you may have someone else who says, we're an amazing place to work, we treat each other like a family, we really share. I mean, you get a lot of context by video, by the way people tell their stories. We also have put a lot of thought into our process, which really tries to steer people away from being able to provide pat answers. So if you ask people, what's the best thing about working at your company?
Right.
Most people say, oh, the people.
The people.
Well, that's great.
But what does it mean?
You got to, yeah, exactly. You have to go beyond that. Otherwise, it doesn't mean anything.
And so you had this idea when? Like, so what's your background? Like, why did you build this?
Yeah, so it was it was a slow process. It wasn't like Athena, jumping out of Zeus's head, fully formed, brilliant idea. I was a management consultant at McKinsey, and I definitely knew that I did not want to stay a management consultant. I was there for a couple years in 2008, 2010, and I remember looking at job boards because it wasn't so much, I wasn't applying to anything yet, but I wanted to know what else was out there after I left. And so I would go to Monster, I would go to LinkedIn's job board, and I would search for things like business strategy. And first of all, on Monster, one of the results that I got was an assistant store manager at a 7-Eleven in Secaucus, New Jersey.
So it is targeted.
Yes, very
it's
targeted.
Incredibly targeted.
I do love hot dogs,
Yes.
so that would be a great job for me.
Right.
But
so in fairness to Monster, like that product hasn't changed since '97 or something, right? Like I mean, it's a job board, it's a classified.
Yeah, and it hasn't really had to.
Right.
And I think there's, to me, there's also this interesting dichotomy between it's a very transactional product. A lot of job boards are transactional. You put in, this is the job that I want, and it spits out, these are 500 things that match your criteria. But again, it's a logo, it's a list of requirements. People have, I believe, a much more deeper relationship with their job these days. If you're going to get notes from your boss on your iPhone 24 hours a day, you damn well ought to love what you do, or at least be bought into why you're at this job versus another job. And so we're trying to essentially help people make decisions about all the options that are out there.
And the people who then would engage with this product, they have to have a pretty dope company. Like if your company kind of sucks to work at, you're just going to put your jobs on Craigslist. You're not going to really want somebody to come in and videotape and be like, hey, what's it like to work for Jason Calacanis? And then they're like, oh my God, this guy is such a prick. Oh my God.
He chains us to our desks.
Yeah, he's just like unreasonable, and he yells and screams about the audio being bad on this week and starts like if you do this, when you go to the Muse, you wouldn't take money from a bad company, right?
No, we do essentially a discovery process where we learn as much about them as they obviously are learning about us. Because if we were known as the place you go where you get mediocre jobs just like everywhere else, that wouldn't necessarily, I don't think, have led us to the place where we are today.
So have you turned people down?
Yes, we have.
Really? What's that? So somebody's like, I want to give you $25,000 to get me new recruits, and you're like, we can't take your money because you suck.
I would never tell a company that. It's part of the process. So we get it's both, we get a lot of leads inbound. Mm-hmm. There's a button on the site that says for employers, and so people see what we're doing and they say, oh, I'm interested in learning more. They can't sign up on the site. Mm-hmm. So a lot of times we'll get a lead, we'll look at the company and we'll say, I'm not sure that this makes sense. And then sometimes it's on the phone. We ask questions around, basically part of it is, do they care about providing a good experience for their employees? Because if that's really not a priority at all, then it doesn't necessarily mean it's never a fit, but maybe it's not a fit now. To your point as well, companies often want to, the companies that come to us, they're the ones who, they want to get great people and they want to say, you should choose us over other great companies because we're better, not because you don't have anything better to do or you don't have a job.
Right. They know that there's going to be choice amongst the people they want. If you're truly going after great people have their choice of where to work.
Yeah, exactly. And it's not just, it's not just 5 tech companies in the same industry. What I think is also so interesting is you have people now who say, well, I could go work for a really small startup, or I could go work for a massive established tech company, or there's this really fascinating nonprofit, or, the Obama campaign. People are moving between industries more than they have in the past, which means that, if you're Facebook, you don't have to just compete against Google. You've got to compete against a lot of other people. And I think that's great for Facebook. I think that's great for, for people as well.
So you come to a landing page, and what would I see as somebody who's looking at? I saw you had witchcraft on there as an example, like which is part of, I guess, the craft.
Yeah.
Who's that? Calicchio? Who's the chef over there?
I think so.
I think it's Calicchio. You should know, it's your client.
I
Anyway,
know.
it's a very
We have a lot
successful
of them.
restaurant, very successful restaurateur, and they have this witchcraft, which is an incredibly popular, like
Sandwich
fast
shop.
casual
Yeah.
sandwich shop where you can buy like a $14 sandwich. Or something like that. So I come to the witchcraft site, and what happens? Like at the Muse. The Muse.com/witchcraft or something?
Exactly, yep. So you'd see high-resolution photos of their offices. You'd see kind of a little bit behind the scenes. Witchcraft is actually photo only, but probably 80% of our companies have video. So there'd be 12 to 14 videos of employees talking about...
12 to 14 videos, wow.
Yep. They're all short. I mean, most people don't want to watch more than,
it's not a
90
documentary.
seconds. Exactly.
Right. Yeah.
But if you go to, for example, Zappos has a great profile. Themuse.com/Zappos, there's 3 featured employees. There's videos about the traditions. There's videos about the office culture.
Yeah.
And then there's videos about, what does it mean to work in business analytics at Zappos? What do you do in a typical day? Because I think that's also as interesting. The job doesn't necessarily mean the exact same thing at every company. And so it kind of gives these individuals a chance to tell their story, both what they do and also why they love doing it specifically at this company.
So I get a view of what it looks like to be there, and then I get an idea of how the people who work there feel, but then they can really target into like these specific positions, because I guess that's the magic of it, because if you have positions that are hard to fill, like some data analytics position where there's a small number of people who do it, it's actually worth making a video for that position where like, maybe we're not going to make a video about a position that's easy to fill. Why would we?
Yeah.
We're getting plenty of applicants.
I would say it's interesting. We, we just signed one of the most beloved brands in the world, which I'm not supposed to talk about till they
Apple.
fully go
Okay.
live.
Is it Apple? Is it
I'm
Apple?
not supposed to talk about
Is it
who they
Apple?
are. I can't say yes or no. Come on. But anyway, very, very beloved. And what's funny is, there's maybe 90% of their positions where they have people lining up around the block to work for them.
Right.
But there's 5 or 10% where they're competing with some other big players. And, it's also necessarily, you don't necessarily think of certain companies for certain things. So an amazing retailer, you may not think they need, e-commerce engineers. And so it's also about companies being able to say, hey, wait a second, you think we're X, but we also are hiring these people too, or we're also doing this interesting work over here, and kind of take control of that story from the perspective of why someone would want to work here.
This is a decidedly not technical startup. But yet you got accepted to Y Combinator. And I don't mean that as a dig, because I'm an editorial guy. As you know, I like to write and I like video. So this is an editorial startup, isn't it?
Yes and no. I think we obviously have a massive base of proprietary tech. We also have great editorial. We also have killer operations. I actually think some of our most, probably some of our most advantageous workings are just being insanely good at operations.
Right. The McKinsey in you.
Well, I was going to say, and in some of the people we brought on, but it's funny. I hate when people try and say, and I totally get what you're doing, but I feel like as much as it's sort of fair to try and draw a line, like what is and what isn't a tech startup, it's often used to kind of,
marginalize.
I was going to say.
Listen, that's my whole career has been in content, so it's not marginalized from my perspective, but I
Totally
think it's kind
get
of like
that.
inspiring that making fantastic content that resonates with people. Like what happens in those videos is the magic. It's not like there's some algorithm matching you to the job. It's you watching and looking in the eyes of somebody who works at that company to try to get a tell on, is this the right place to work?
Are you going to spend the next 1 to 5 years of your life at that company? And I think, we've definitely been experimenting with some interesting stuff on the algorithm side, because obviously what you do not want is an ex-McKinsey consultant finding 7-Eleven jobs on your site.
Right.
But that said, I have seen so many sites out there that, have brilliant technology but don't manage to capture that human angle. I think that's what our particular space is missing.
All right, when we get back from this commercial break, I want to talk about millennials, because you sort of hinted that this is like kind of geared towards millennials who actually really care about their life experience, and they're all very self-absorbed and whatnot. So we'll get into that whole controversy when we get back after this message. No offense, Jacob. I know you're a millennial. Yes, Citrix Sharefile. Amazing sharing of files designed for business. Yes, it's a cloud you can trust, and you can send files securely on there. This is great for IP and contracts and term sheets. The most sensitive documents that you don't want to put in email, you could put in Sharefile. And you can send files of almost any size, access them from any computer or mobile device. And here's how we use it here at This Week in Startups and the Launch Festival. We request files be uploaded to a specific folder, and we get email alerts when people drop their contracts in there or other, documents like term sheets and all the stuff that I use for angel investing. And we can control who has access to these files on a very granular level. So some people can open them, some people can edit them. You get the idea. And if you want to get Sharefile and start using the world's most powerful file sharing service, just go to sharefile.com and click on the podcast microphone button. That's right, sharefile.com, the podcast microphone button, and use the offer code TWIST, This Week in Startups. That's our little code, TWIST. No credit card required, 30-day free trial. And this is your last chance to get the top 10 questions answered by the world's greatest investors. This includes David Cohen, Joanne Wilson, Dave McClure, Steve Jurvetson, Brad Feld, Mark Suster, all these amazing investors. All you do is sign up for Sharefile using the offer code TWIST, sharefile.com, use the offer code TWIST, and send a request a file link to sharefile@launch.co. Just request a file link to sharefile@launch.co, and we will send you that video, which is only available to people on Sharefile. Thanks again to our friends at Citrix for making something as wonderful as Sharefile. And let's get back to this amazing program. All right, welcome back to This Week in Startup, hosted by a curmudgeonly Gen Xer who grew up at a time when you just took your job and you weren't expecting to actually be fulfilled in any way by your work other than to sustain yourself until you could replace your boss's company or your band could hit it big. I'm dating myself on MTV, right? And my guest is Kathryn Minshew with The Muse. You can check out themuse.com. And I guess you could check out themuse.com/witchcraft/Facebook/Zappos/ Gucci. Wow, really great places to work. And when we left, we were talking a little bit about Millennials, because you said, you sort of hinted at this, and I got the sense this was like a millennial sort of based project. And you can correct me if I'm wrong, but you did mention like, oh my God, if your boss is going to be texting you at 1 a.m. or on the weekends, and you're going to really have to love the job you're at because work has changed fundamentally. So I guess two questions. How has work changed? And you can take it in whichever order you want. And how has this next group of workers changed?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, and I think that's the perfect question for why we do what we do. In terms of how work has changed, the simplest way I think to say it is that, linear career paths are far less common than they used to be. So it's no longer as typical for someone to major in something, enter the workforce, move up for 40 years and then get a nice watch at their retirement party. People are not only moving around much more within companies, but they're also moving between industries. They may not just move to a similar company, but they may do something completely different, but using the same skill set. And so I think with all of that choice comes obviously a lot of pressure on people who are making those decisions. I also think it means that companies are investing less in training workers because there's this sense of, I'm going to send this person, to a training program if they leave in 18 months. And then
the tenure is crazy. I mean, like a lot of these millennials, like they show up and they're like, they get 9 months in or 18 months in. And they're like, yeah, I got to go like to Tibet. And I'm like, I'm sorry, we don't have an office in Tibet. They're like, no, I have to go to Tibet because I have to do this thing. It's a level of self-absorption that was beaten out of my generation, basically.
So I think there's some good in that and some really extreme bad behavior.
Yeah.
What I would say I think is positive is that you have people who are really kind of thinking, how does what I do contribute to the larger organization?
Right. Mission-driven.
Yes, it's very mission-driven. It's also just saying, I think we see all the time people, they will go to the moon and back, but they want to know why. Like, don't just send me the moon because you don't have anything else to do with me.
Right.
I can entertain myself, but if you need something, I will make it happen for you.
Right.
And there is a bit of a burden on, on essentially companies say, well, I got to now tell all these people how their work fits into the bigger picture, but that's actually just kind of good management. So
it is good management to like explain the mission.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, what's interesting is, so when you look at people who are using the Muse, I mean, the average age is 29 years old. They range from, college students all the way through late 30s, early 40s. We also get a lot of career changers, people who've spent 10 years in the same field, and suddenly they wake up and go, oh my goodness, I don't actually want to be doing this anymore.
Yeah, I don't want to come to the office tomorrow.
Yeah, and I don't want to propagate the belief that work is supposed to be, kittens and rainbows, because work is hard. Work is really hard. I do things all the time that are not my favorite activity, but I think it's more that, you look at these statistics that 70% of workers in the US are disengaged with their jobs, and you think if we could just get a few more people on a path towards doing something that they're interested in.
Right.
A
little
I think
more
we can
alignment.
Exactly. And I think part of it is, and we do this a lot with the content on the Muse, and we have free classes, and we can talk about all that later, but telling people, you don't have to like, and you will not like everything about your job, but look at your boss's job. Look at your boss's boss job. Are you at least working towards something that you think you're going to like, or are you just doing something that's going to, give you a paycheck every week, and then you're going to wake up in 15 years and go, oh my goodness, what have I spent, the last 10 years doing?
Yeah, I see. It's very interesting, the generational thing, because I think the boomers just were, I have to spend 30 years at this job or so.
Work's
and
work.
Work's work, and that's it. And they just, get drunk on the weekend and joke about how terrible work was. And they had this like Gen X, like where, hey, wait, maybe we could be the bosses kind of moment, like because the internet started in 94, 95. Like, hey, we could be in charge. And now you have this next generation, which is like, yeah, I know you're in charge, but I kind of should be in charge, and I kind of feel like you should tell me what's going on so that I can sort of make more decisions. And then maybe a little bit of a grit or resiliency issue with this new generation, because I do feel like even if they're in line with the mission, sometimes they don't have the wherewithal to sort of stick with it. And they're more than willing to move back in with mom and dad or live on a friend's couch and do something else, which in a way I'm kind of jealous of that ability to say, I'm not happy and I'm going to go pursue something else. But I think you kind of miss something too if you don't get through that grind out period. Almost every great experience in my life was like some crazy, precursor of grinding it out and hating work for 6 months. And then something magical happened in month 7. So are you able to sort of calibrate people's expectation and make this generation of workers even more realistic about what work is through the videos? And, do you emphasize that?
Yeah.
Like, it's not going to be easy, but it's really a great mission kind of thing?
Yeah, I mean, I think you've got to divide any, generation, we're talking about a big group of people here, into, let's roughly just say 3 categories. On one hand, you've got the best of this generation. They are entrepreneurial, whether it's within a company, they're going the extra mile, blah, blah, blah. You say lots of good
whatever.
Things. Yeah. Then I think you have people in this generation, just like in every before, that, that are just like kind of doing a terrible job at life. You know, they're like not sticking with anything, very entitled, they're whining. I was going to say, it's. I don't think it's unique to millennials, but they sure exist here, just like I think they exist anywhere else.
It's definitely in a greater proportion, and they own it a lot better. I mean, you watch the TV show Girls?
I've seen,
Yeah, I mean, it's just like every season that goes by, they just become more and more self-absorbed and out of touch, and I find it quite charming because the person who writes the show, Lena Dunham, is obviously like the most successful person in her generation, writing about how her generation has absolutely no wherewithal or grit, and they're totally self-absorbed. It's a very meta commentary.
Yeah, you watch that show and you're like, wow, I know all these people. But and
then there's everybody in the middle.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I think that's where it gets interesting. I mean, what's also fascinating for me is you do have, to some extent, this generation of parents who raised a lot of kids saying, you can be whatever you want to be. You can be president. Study hard so you don't get a job at McDonald's. And now they're like, why are you working at Starbucks?
Yeah.
And so there is a little bit of expectation setting. And I think we do work hard within our community. I mean, we have, we publish 40 original articles every week on the content side of the Muse. We have like free classes on starting a job off right and being a manager for the first time. And a lot of that content, it's not maybe explicitly beating you over the head, but it's saying like, guess what? Work it's hard. There's going to be tough times. Your boss's job is not to make your life amazing. But again, I think there's a little bit of a give and take in that there are certain things that you should be able to expect from work. And what I find fascinating is you're seeing these mass movements of, again, looking at, the best people in the sort of middle group. They're moving away from companies that act essentially as sort of labor extraction factories.
Right.
And in towards companies that are at least making some effort to tell people, this is why you're here. And, it doesn't necessarily excuse the person who just leaves after 9 months because they want to go to Tibet. But, maybe
I
that
wanna go to
person needs
Tibet.
to find themselves in Tibet, and then they're going
And they'll be all
to come
good.
back and do something amazing. So
I think it's a great give and take, because we did have this moment in time where, like you said, it was just like, how much labor can we extract at, how low of a price, and how oppressive can we be, to, oh my God, we're going to start a company that's not sustainable because we're all going to go to Tibet. It's tibet.com, gettibet.com.
That'd be an expensive URL. You'd need lots of resources
Yeah, I know.
to buy
Go
that.
tibet.com, the startup where we all go to Tibet, and that's the startup. But it does make the management actually think like about the other group of people, like the people who are actually doing the work, and are they having a great experience, and are they motivated to come to work every day? And I do think that is virtuous, because people are coming to work in a way to fulfill the dream of the founder. The people coming to work every day to the Muse, they're believing in Kathryn's vision of how the world should be. Like, they're giving up, in a way, like whatever their number one mission in the world is, to support yours. And so that does actually kind of make you, as the business owner, responsible to them in a way.
Yeah. I mean, I think intensely so. And in fact, it's one of the things I wish was talked about a bit more in tech. I think there's, a lot of writing and kind of talk about tech founders like living large with these glamorous lifestyle. But I actually think when you are starting a business and you are convincing people to turn down job offers at companies that will never go out of business, to come work more hours, likely for less pay, probably with fewer benefits and support.
And you got to do the crummy
unbelievable
work.
Exactly. And until 3 weeks ago, we didn't have an office manager at the Muse. So guess who took out the trash? Me and everyone else on the team.
Yeah.
And
Coffee
just
spilled?
because
Great. Good luck.
Yeah,
Clean
exactly.
it up.
Like, you can be, our top salesperson or our best engineer, and we would still love you to help do the dishes sometimes.
Right.
And I think building that into a company's core is actually really powerful. It doesn't mean, obviously, we got an amazing office manager, and now other people get to do stuff like that sometimes, and it's great. But I think I don't ever want to hire someone who thinks they are too good to do those things.
Oh, no. All right. When we get back from the commercial break, I want to ask you the difficult question, because you launched this company in time for, the greatest rebound in a long time, perhaps one of the greatest rebounds in history. I mean, actually, it's probably second only to the Great Depression. So in terms of rebounds and hiring, boy, you're living in boom times, and your company's doing fantastic. But what happens when the inevitable downturn, recession hits, which I guess people thought was going to happen in the last couple of weeks, and it didn't. So it's probably going to happen in the next couple of weeks when we get back after this important message. Yes, Squarespace. Beautiful websites designed easily by non-technical people for an incredibly affordable price. This is the world's greatest service for just quickly getting a website up and running and making it look like you spent literally $25,000, $50,000, $100,000 with a design firm and a technical firm. Squarespace is an amazing startup out of New York. They are absolutely crushing it. They've got an amazing team. You should go work there if you're a technical person. Honestly, it's like a great culture and great team. But this partner spot is about how awesome the product is. It's so easy to use. We use it for all of our events here, as you know. When you go to any of our launch festival sites or Launch Beacon, we use their product, and we love it because it's so easy to make changes that you don't need to call some technical person. And then if you want to use it on mobile, it just works. So when somebody takes out their phone and they're looking at your site, it works and it looks gorgeous. In fact, it probably looks even better than it does on the desktop. They are mobile first, and they make gorgeous, responsive designs. It's amazing. No credit card is required. Go to squarespace.com to try it out for free, and it starts at only $8 a month, which to me, they should probably add a 0 or 2. It really would be worth $80 or $800 a month. They charge $8. I don't know. That's their business model. They're charging you a fraction of what the value is, but it seems to be working for them pretty well. And they have a gorgeous new design template. Here it is. I'm pulling it up on my screen. This is what they call their Pacific one. And as you can see, when you click on the restaurant or the menu, you get this really quick responsive design where it flips up and down the page and looks gorgeous. Like, this looks like this restaurant spent $100,000 on the site. And if you were going to use this template, you could just click Start with this design on the top left and start putting in your logo, putting in your photo of your restaurant or your store or your event, right? This would work perfect for the Launch Festival. Maybe we should use this one and change our template. And you know what? That's what we do here at Launch and at This Week in Startups. We just keep changing our template and using their awesome products. It's just everything you need to create an exceptional website. Go ahead, and if you decide to keep your Squarespace site, use the promo code TWIST because that helps us because then they see, hey, we've got really this great audience that actually uses the products, and I know you do because I see you all tweeting about it. 24-hour support for creating exceptional-looking websites. When you have a family member, a business associate, anybody asks you at a party, at dinner, at lunch, at a business thing, hey, how do I get a great website? You know, work on a project, we want to get a website up. Yeah, just go to Squarespace, pick a gorgeous template, and look super professional and not ever need to call some technical, flaky person who you found on Craigslist or Elance to set up your site, and then they disappear, and then they want to charge you a ransom to make changes that on Squarespace you can make in 10 seconds. All right, listen, I can't go on and on for an hour about Squarespace. I mean, I could. I love it. But we have to get back to this amazing program. Thanks again to our friends at Squarespace. Let's get back to the program. All right, welcome back to This Week in Startups. I'm your host, Jason Calacanis. You can follow me on the Twitter at Jason. Yes, I'm showing off. It's just Jason in case you needed to know how to spell it, and you'd search at Jason. God, I love having at Jason on Twitter. Isn't that the greatest thing ever, Jacob? You have at Jacob, right, Jacob? Oh, you're Jacob Beamer. Okay, I'll get you Jacob. Don't worry about that. You have at Kathryn, I take it, yeah?
I have at K-Min.
At K-Min?
Yeah, 4 letters. K-M-I-N.
Do your friends call you K-Min?
Actually, only after the Twitter handle.
Really?
Not before that. No, I never had a nickname when I was a kid.
I let people call me J-Cal. And then when I play poker, they call me J-Call. Which is kind of like a dig, because they're like, you always call, and I'm like, yeah, I just got to see what you have. Cayman's a good nickname. I like that.
Yeah, my team calls me Snacky Muse, so that's my other good one.
Snacky Muse.
Yeah,
because you're constantly snacking.
I'm snacking all the time.
Really? Oh, that's fascinating.
We have a very snacky office, and I lead the charge.
Oh, do you provide snacks for all your millennials?
I mean, actually, not until recently, because we're still pretty kind of scrappy roots, even though we're doing well. But we now have like 3 snacks on rotation. So
yes. That's nice. That's nice. Yeah, so you've got to be very slow in giving out snacks, I always tell everybody, or food, because if you take it away, oh my God. Like I took lunch away at Mahalo at some point, and I was like, wow, we got to recover from this panda update. And I was like, yeah, we're not going to have food coming in every day. And people were like, oh my God, I have to buy my own food. I was like,
the sky is falling.
Every other day of your life. So how do you make money? And then we'll get to this next cliffhanger question about, hey, when the economy goes down. So are people paying you like a monthly? Does Zappos pay you like $1,000 a month to put this page up? Or do they pay you one time to build it? Or do you refresh it every 3 months? How does it work?
Yeah, so companies pay a subscription to have the profile in all their listings. Mm-hmm. It depends a little bit on what they want, what they're hiring for. So a company that's hiring, hundreds of people and specifically trying to get female engineers and, XYZ specialty is going to be really different from a startup that's got a couple positions open. But generally, small companies put up photo profiles, or rather we help them put up photo profiles. And for bigger companies, we have a network of freelance photographer, videographers in major cities around the U.S. that actually go in and create all the content. So, if we're going to, we signed up, Lyft recently. So we're going to send someone into Lyft's office, help create the content,
I'm not
tell
aware
the
of this
story.
company, Lyft. What is this Lyft?
Pink mustaches,
the competitor to Uber. Sorry, I have to wear my Uber. I love Lyft too.
No, I'm a big Uber fan as well, and they're also hiring on the site. So
beautiful.
Go to
beautiful. Everybody go to
Uber.
the Muse/Uber. Do not go to no,
it's not live yet anyway. So
I'm fine with Lyft. It's fine.
But the idea basically being that even though a lot of these companies have tons of people who want to work for them, but there's specific roles often where they want more people.
Okay, so you didn't answer the question. How much? What's the minimum I can get in for? If I just want to put up 3 jobs and put up my pictures of $5,000, $10,000 a year?
Trying to ruin my business, Jason?
I just want to know the ballpark.
Well,
I mean, Jason Fried from 37 Sales would be very upset if you didn't put the price on the site. So is it like it's a consultation each time, but is it
so it depends.
$5,000 to $250,000?
Yeah, we've got startups that pay like $200 a month, and we have major businesses that pay $5,000.
Okay, so that's totally
and based
reasonable.
on what it is that they need and what kind of what tier. Let's get your classic startup, growth stage, pro and enterprise.
Well, listen, $2,500 a year if you hire one person every 4 years
is totally worth it.
It's paid for itself.
Yeah.
I mean, it's only $10,000. So literally, one every 10 years you're good. And then on the other side, if you're spending $60,000 a year and you're a bigger company, or $100,000 a year, my gosh.
You hire 3 people off us, it makes sense. You hire 50 people off us, and it's a stupidly good investment.
It's an amazing investment. Can they take the videos and the content and put it on their site, or does it have to exist on yours?
So we actually just made it possible. We haven't announced it yet, but basically, it's you can kind of iframe in your profile anywhere you want.
Embed it, right? Yeah.
Yeah. So we have a bunch of companies now that their career site, it used to be like 5 sentences barfed out by a robot and a list of jobs, and now it looks beautiful. It's photos, it's videos, and it's all powered by the Muse, but living on their site.
What happens when the economy goes kaput, and there's more candidates for these jobs than there are, openings.
Yeah. So I think what's interesting is, businesses like ours are definitely susceptible to the cycles.
Yeah.
But LinkedIn and, Indeed and Cribble, they didn't go away when the
Right.
economy went down, because there's a lot of things, essentially there's a lot of ways that you make money. On one hand, I think a lot of companies that are paying us, they already get lots of applicants. It's not a question of needing more people, it's the right people, it's specific types of people. And even in a worse economy, I think we can still deliver quite a bit above and beyond their other channels.
Right. Still hard to get a data scientist, whether the economy
Exactly.
is
It doesn't
good or
really
bad.
matter right now. Like, maybe in 10 years out, but I guarantee you there will be other things in 10 years, as,
Sure.
as you well know.
Yeah.
The second thing is that I think is really interesting is right now we don't charge individuals at all. There's nothing on the site. If you are a person, if you go to themuse.com, like, you cannot possibly pay us. Everything is free. We have free classes, we have free videos, we have, free webinars, all this stuff. But there's a lot of demand for it. And so one of the things that we are looking at doing down the road is offering essentially the training that companies aren't providing. We're doing a lot of it already. Like, we have a lot of companies that come to us.
How to be an employee.
Yeah, exactly.
How to
because,
be an adult training.
Yeah. So it's funny, right? You used to, as we go back to the linear career path, you'd graduate college, you'd go into a company, and you would spend your first month or 6 months doing training. And
You might go to a training program, especially if you're going to a McKinsey, so it might be a year long.
Yeah, you go through all sorts of training, and companies spent huge amounts of money making sure you knew how to deal with your boss, how to act in front of clients, how to write emails. And so, yes, there's a lot of, wailing and gnashing of teeth about the fact that millennials don't know how to do this.
Yeah.
But a lot of it's also that there's not really anyone telling them often. And so we serve that function. And so a lot of companies, again, have been coming to us, and we haven't explored this yet, but we get offers all the time from businesses that say, well, what if you built a little virtual center using what you already have on the Muse to train our employees?
Genius.
And we would need to be a little bit bigger as a business to essentially productize that, but the need is there. And I think it's really interesting. It's the other thing is, a lot of these people, they don't necessarily want someone to come in and teach a 12-hour seminar. They're like, okay, I need to know something right now. I want the 2-minute video. And it's not that long form content doesn't have a very important place, but it's more that if you are managing for the first time and you have to give critical feedback to somebody, you don't want to look in a book. You may not be able to call your mentor. You would love to just have like the 500 words on how to handle that.
That would be an incredible subscription service, because people do outsource their HR stuff. Like, oh my God, we're going to do sexual harassment training or this training or that training, and there's compliance involved in a lot of these things. So if you could package that, but also package what people would kind of consider the soft stuff, like how to present at a meeting, how to dress for work,
how to listen,
how to ask a question, how to deal about, how to express frustration at work, right?
Yeah,
like,
the right and wrong ways to solve conflicts at work. Like,
exactly.
oh, you mean I shouldn't punch walls and post
Or
on social media?
How to resign properly, not in a blog post.
Actually, to be honest, we have a post on giving your 30 days or 2 weeks notice on how to resign. They're very popular because a lot of people Googling out there, that's how they're getting their information.
Yeah.
They're going to Google
It's a great
and say,
content marketing
how do I
strategy
resign?
for you, yeah. And if they're resigning, they're going to be looking for a new thing. It is amazing. I've had people resign and give no notice or give like a week's notice. I was like, wow, let me explain to you the proper way to
how this is done.
Yeah, no, it's just like, hey boss, I think I've learned a ton here and I super appreciate it, but I feel like I need to go on to my next adventure, and I got something I'm really passionate about I want to do. So I wanted to just check in with you about, because I respect you so much and you've been so great to me here at whatever company, the Muse. Maybe we could talk about, what I could do to transition out and make sure the company is on solid footing, because gosh, the last thing I want to do is leave you guys in the lurch after you've been so good to me.
Yeah.
Like, is that so hard to say?
We had somebody early on who essentially granted, it was a great opportunity, but he literally called us up. This was, 2 years ago. And he said, I'm starting immediately and I won't be able to finish anything.
Wow.
And we ended up coming to a place where he did enough.
Yeah.
But it was, I think it's partially just about making sure people know that there are standards of behavior that often govern professional interactions, and that people generally expect you to at least be aware of them.
Yeah, why would you burn a reference, right? Like burning a reference, like they're going to know this person who worked at the Muse at some point. Somebody, it's a small world, is going to call you, even if they don't put them on the resume. Somebody's going to figure out you worked there, and they're going to call, and you're going to be like, I don't feel comfortable giving a reference. What do you do if you have somebody who did a terrible job for you and you don't feel comfortable giving them a reference?
So assuming a third party calls you.
Yeah, a friend of yours says, this person who worked for you, I'm going to make it even harder. A friend, somebody like who you go to dinner with every month says like, hey, I'm thinking about hiring Jason. Like, we work there. What do you think?
So, obviously, classic HR advice would be that you say something really vague like, I don't feel comfortable giving a reference. Yeah. I personally, if it were a friend, early in my career, I got burned really badly by going into a partnership with someone that had known toxic behavior to other people. And after the partnership went bad, 4 different people came up to me and said, oh, I have been wanting to tell you, but I didn't think it was appropriate.
Oh, boy.
So-and-so situation, and this really, truly horrible thing happened. Or not happened. This person did a really, truly horrible thing.
This is a bad actor.
But I didn't feel it was my place to tell you. And so since then, my personal strategy is if it's over the phone, then I'm honest. And granted, most people I worked with have been amazing. I am happy to not only give them reference, I will go out and wave the banner and say,
introduce them to somebody.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I can't have this person anymore, but they are incredible.
Yeah.
But I think, their life is short, and I think you should work with people who are good. And if I know somebody, especially if it's not, youth or immaturity, if I think somebody
is not a mistake.
Yeah. If it's a
mistake,
ethics, values question, I feel like it's important to share that information, because otherwise the person can essentially,
go through life without learning that there's a ramification for their insane behavior. I have a pretty good way of doing it now that I'm older. I just say, I give everybody an absolutely glowing reference, and I go out of my way to help them find new gigs, and sometimes I'll even angel invest in their companies. Or I say nothing. And they say, so what do you think of this person? And I say nothing. That's it. Then it's up to the person to fill in like, oh my God, you go to bat for everybody, but now you say nothing about this person? Yeah, now I say nothing.
Interesting.
I like that, yeah. Instead of like me having to go into detail about it, but it's interesting. The things go bad, and so I always, I kind of look at your site like I think about Glassdoor or there were some other anonymous ones, but so how... Are you like the opposite of Glassdoor or the anecdote to Glassdoor? I got barbecued on Glassdoor at times in my career. It depends on the company. But when a company goes bad or you lay people off, like I had to lay off 50 people, like you're going to get 5 people who are going to paint you in a horrible way.
Yeah.
What do you think of Glassdoor?
So I think what they do is really interesting. I'm not surprised that they have, massive traffic growth.
When you say really interesting, is that like a nice way of saying you would never do anything close to that and you hate it?
So I actually think I'm very glad they exist, and I use them. Like back when I was a job seeker.
Okay, so you do think there's a place in the world for anonymous reviews of workplaces?
Yeah, I think it's really, really interesting. We will never have that on the Muse unless the world radically changes from its current state, because when I look back at previous jobs, and thinking about my experience, I think generally what you get when you have anonymous reviews, especially about something like work, is people who loved it and people who hated it. And you don't, because it's text, obviously, you don't get a lot of context about who those people are. So you may have someone who worked at a place that was really long hours and loved that, or they may hate it. But to some extent, I think that says as much about what they're looking for, not a value judgment on them. What I'm really interested in doing for us as we get bigger is finding areas where there's essentially 2 extremes, neither one of which is it's not the vertical line of like, this is great and this is terrible.
Right.
It's, this is very individual contributor driven and this is unbelievably collaborative. Or, areas where there's just, competition versus, all sorts of things that you can put companies a bit more on a spectrum instead of saying...
Right. This is an intense competitive workplace where people work on the weekends.
Yeah.
This is a live-work balance type opportunity where it's not competitive and people leave work by 5 to have dinner with their families at 6.
Exactly. I mean, I've worked at places where, pre-management consulting, where people left at 5, and it drove me crazy because there was massive critically important work that needed to be done. In one case, it was an international development, and people were just like, maybe tomorrow, maybe the next day.
Yeah.
And so I think it partially depends on the context, on the individual. And, there are people, my co-founder, has these amazing stories of being in a work environment at one point where somebody I think like screamed, I'm not passive aggressive, I'm just aggressive. And she was like, that's great. She just it didn't faze her, essentially. Right. That work environment could be toxic for someone who, is quite sensitive, who's looking for kind of close coworker relationships. Yeah. And it could be incredibly empowering if the problems are interesting enough for someone who's, a great person. Like, she would never do that. But if other people are, going a little crazy, she's like, whatever, you done? Cool, let's get back to work. And so I think it's also about teasing out a little bit of that nuance versus just saying, this place is...
How do the best companies keep people engaged? Like, because you talked about because you talked about hey, what's the mission and making sure people are engaged, but then there's rough patches. I mean, what do you see in your client base? Because they are the best of the best companies typically. Mm-hmm. What do they do, so well that people will stay longer and encourage other people to join the company? Not counting perks and stuff like that, where they're buying people off.
Totally, that's not culture. That's it's a ping pong table. It's great. Yeah. So there's a number of things. I think one is discrete paths to promotions or to advancing within the company. For example, one large business that I talked to at one point, they had what was a 3-year program, and at the end of 3 years, you got promoted, or you got laid off. And with, again, going back to the changing expectations of a lot of millennials, but they ended up dividing it into a series of 6-month kind of tiers. They didn't change what happened at the end of 3 years, but there was a sense of progress where every 6 months you now knew whether you were on track or not on track, and you would get, a small title bump, and it made people feel like they were making progress, they were moving along. And
it's not gamification, but it's a path to success that I can track against.
Exactly. You kind of get a sense of where you are versus your peers versus the overall opportunity. I think there's I'm trying to think, there's something we do at the Muse, which I really like because, we don't necessarily have the money to pay everyone the big bucks yet. Yeah. But we regularly check in with people and ask, what are professional goals of yours, whether or not they have to do with your role? And is there a way for someone on the company to achieve them? So, and I've seen this in bigger companies as well, where they actively say, who wants to speak on behalf of this company on a panel? And obviously you have to trust that person, but that's a great incentive. If you want to go out and talk about, your role to a broader audience and your company facilitates that, I think that's an incredible thing to do.
It's interesting that you bring that up because I'm dealing with that right now at inside.com with my developer team. And boy, I've got a really amazing team because we did the distributed workforce thing. So people can work wherever they want, but they really want to go speak at events and they want to do this stuff. And I'm like, okay, well, not only is that going to cost $2,000 or $3,000 that we don't have, it's also going to be you're out of the office for 2 or 3 weeks. Or I'm sorry, 2 or 3 days. Yeah. So we're going to lose you for, let's call it a week. Because you're going to have 1 or 2 days of work and then, you're going to be preparing for the speaking. So I'm going to lose 4% of your year.
So I'll counter you, though. First of all, you may find that that's worth more to people than 3% of their salary. You may not. It's a personal preference.
That's interesting.
But you may find that it's worth more.
I think if you asked them that, if I gave you this salary, if you had a $100,000 salary, would you take 97 and the ability to speak at a conference every year? I'm going to bet they would take it.
I think people would too, because it's actually, an investment for them.
Yeah.
It depends a little bit with the distributed team. I always ask if the conference will fly in my people. So I'll say, I want to recommend so-and-so on my team to speak, but before I ask them if they're available, do you cover transit? Now, I may still offer it to them, right. But I also often, because again, given the size of our team, the company doesn't pay for the most part. It doesn't pay if I want to go fly to speak somewhere. Usually either the organizer pays or the individual can.
Or the individual can pay themselves.
Yeah, if it's a great opportunity. I've done it before, especially early stage.
I like that. Yeah, it's a good compromise.
Because essentially as an individual, you are investing in your own professional development because now you are not just a great employee, you are a thought leader, you are a speaker. Yeah.
The bosses take that for granted too, because I'm like, I turn down 50 of these things a month and none of them ever actually result in everything. Yeah, but when you're on the other side, you take it for granted. This person's never been on a panel with 50 people in the room and you've been doing keynotes or whatever.
I always ask, unless it's specifically a founder thing, I'll say, if I can't make it, can I offer this to you?
No.
And I usually say,
no is the answer for my conferences. I'm founder only.
But it's
I'm a
funny.
founder snob.
It's funny too because our first employee our very first employee is now our editor-in-chief because we used content initially to get the audience that was going to apply to these companies.
Content is not a dirty word, by the way.
I know, but
You're a content company.
I'm a little scarred because when I first started fundraising, I had people look me in the eyes and say, "I will write you $1 million check right now if you kill your content. If you promise me you will never publish another article."
You know what? Just tell them BuzzFeed.
No, they're idiots, but it still scarred me.
Well, if you do
idiots can scar you almost as well as smart people.
More so, actually. But now you can just be like, listen, BuzzFeed. You just say BuzzFeed to people, Upworthy. Like all these dumb VCs, like who hated content. Now they're like, oh, Huffington Post and BuzzFeed have hundreds of millions of, uniques.
Well, it's also, okay, for our business, if we didn't have content, we would be a place where people went when they were desperate to get jobs. And no company wants to hire those people. No, they want to hire the person who's reading an article about how to be more effective at networking and then sees, oh, interesting. Peloton is hiring. I wonder what it's like to work there. Oh, this looks really cool. That's exactly what companies want in the first place. Yeah. So anyway, I think content is brilliant. But back to just the finishing the loop, our editor-in-chief, amazing. I used to do a little bit of TV. People want, like CNBC would want me to go on air and talk about millennials and the workforce. And after a period of time, there were a lot of requests. And so I essentially started grooming her to be
the on-air personality.
And now she's gone on national television and talked about the company. And it's great for the company. It's great for her. It's great for me. Everybody wins.
Yourself. Yeah.
And I was going to say, and I still do appearances too. Yeah. But it's really nice because now, instead of, obviously, like I would love to be able to pay her even more, but that's something that's valuable that she can't buy.
Oh, yeah.
Is a boss who's going to say, I'm going to get you on national television. And we try and do that in other ways for people on the team. And I think that's less of a company policy and more of kind of an individual thing. But if you can do that, I think it's worth a lot to people.
Especially, fame, being recognized. Recognition is like such a huge driver. What I'm thinking of doing is if we hit the milestones I want to hit in terms of growth, I'm going to give everybody 1 day. And then if we hit this next milestone, they can get 2 days to go to a conference. And if they hit the third milestone, they can get like $1,000 in travel costs.
Oh,
I'm just going to dole it out based on performance.
No,
and then I'm going to let them trade it with each other. So like one person can give their days to another person or whatever.
Interesting. In exchange for what?
Whatever. Okay. Whatever. Maybe trading
homemade cookies.
You have to be careful with the entitlement and people thinking that the speaking gig is more important than the product, right? Like if the product is growing, if the Muse is closing deals, sure, it's that time. But if it's not closing deals, that's a not right now kind of a...
Yeah, I think especially when you're building a company, everyone's got to realize that when we're all winning, like life is good, we can, invest in things and do things. And when we're not hitting our numbers, obviously, like the same rules don't always apply. So
not right now list. So you went to Y Combinator, you raised $2 million for this business, or over $2 million. You got some great investors. I saw 500 startups and Alexis from Reddit, who's been on the program, is awesome. So proper VC round. It sounds like now's the time. The market's great. You've got clients. I'm assuming you're getting to that $1 million a year run rate. Time to raise money?
At some point, it's funny. I love that point in an entrepreneur's life where you go from being the one sending the emails to the VCs to getting all the inbound from the VCs.
That's a nice turn of events.
Yeah, it is. But that said, I think first of all, we're in the middle of June. Having conversations now doesn't make any sense.
Yeah.
Everyone. I mean, I will not be on vacation through August, but everyone,
they're going to be in the Hamptons,
investors,
Greece, Italy. Yeah.
And I think we definitely. So we've had obviously a couple of seed VCs that participated in our rounds, and for me, when I just look at who has invested in us, the difference between the people that really like have our backs, are constantly thinking, and the people that are just kind of money. I mean. It's one thing when you're a seed investor, but I think we're going to be very, very deliberate about how we think about this next round.
Yeah.
Because if there's anything I've learned in my many previous rounds of fundraising, and it's we attempted to raise in 2011. It was a total bloodbath, and then successfully in 2012. There's some brilliant, great investors out there, and there's some people that I really would be just much happier not having in my life.
Yeah, the panicky investors. But you have 20 investors, and you've done what, three different tranches or something? 4 different tranches?
3. Yeah.
It takes a lot of time, doesn't it?
I mean, fundraising is, it's
Well,
nice making good revenue
Yeah.
because it essentially changes how you have to think about taking capital. It's
And you
beautiful.
finished Y Combinator in 2012?
Yep.
So a lot of criticism of Y Combinator with the female founder thing. They've obviously turned it around. Now they've got like, whatever, 20%. But you were there when it was probably more like 2, 3, 4% of people were female founders. How many female founders in your class out of 80?
They were 7 women out of maybe 130 or 140 founders.
Okay, so like 5% or something.
Yeah, I think it was 4%.
Yeah.
And my co-founders and I we're all 3 women with brown hair. So for the first month, nobody could tell us apart, which is funny because we really don't look that similar. But
Did you never felt like Y Combinator was anyway a sexist organization like some people have claimed on the Twitter?
no, I mean, I really love YC.
Yeah.
I'm actually, I spoke at the Female Founders Conference.
Sure, that
I
was
think
amazing, huh?
Yeah, it was great. Actually, it was really
Yeah.
neat to be in a room with all those,
Yeah.
all of those just unbelievably driven women.
Yeah.
And I think for me, I actually really love, I think that YC looked beyond what we were as a company in, when we first applied, September of 2011, we were this tiny baby. We'd basically been turned down by everyone in New York City. And YC looked at us and said, you know what, people aren't judging you the right way. Or people aren't looking at you right. And so I definitely think that there are big, deep-seated issues in the tech community.
Yeah.
I've obviously experienced a lot of like pretty crazy stuff myself, but
Really?
yeah, I mean,
Like what?
so
Because Y Combinator they just accepted you based on the merit of your ideas, and they didn't treat you any differently because you were a female founder, right?
yeah, so YC was great. I
Yeah.
think
That's why I don't understand why people we're giving a YC a hard time. I mean, I understand the statistics look bad, 5% or whatever, but there were times when you didn't have that many female applicants, right? Like, I mean, there just weren't a lot of female starting companies 10 years ago. It's
I also think-
skyrocketed now.
I do think that people are more aware now of some of the unintentional signals. I
Yeah.
remember when I went to, before we applied to YC, they had an event in New York, and it was, it was come see some of our YC founders and learn
Yeah.
about applying to YC. And I don't remember how many people spoke, but I do remember that there were no women on stage. And I left and I decided not to apply. And it was the day before applications were due, somebody else called me up and said, you better apply. And I was like, no, we're not going to. It's not worth the time. And she was like, you have to do it. It's a woman named Rachel Sklar. But I do
Yeah, I know
think,
Rachel, yeah.
I think organizations in general, not YC specifically, but in general, are just becoming a bit more aware that sometimes, it's really helpful just to say, hey, FYI, we're excited about young founders and older founders, women and men.
Right.
A
Just
variety.
to clarify, like, hey, this is not a 20-person.
Because people are also rational. If you think that someone only funds a certain type of thing, then you're going to spend your time elsewhere. And so I also think YC is seeing more female applications, partially because there's more women in tech, and partially because it's become more clear that YC is looking for things like that.
Right. When they had the Female Founders Day, it's like, hey, there's a flag. Like, yes, we're celebrating this, right? Like, we really want this to happen. But you've experienced other things as a female founder. What's it been like?
Yeah, I mean, I think, on one end you have the really innocuous, which is that in general, when I go to events, it happens less now because people tend to know the Muse, and there's more women in general. But when I started out and I would go to a tech event, people would just assume that I was someone's girlfriend and wouldn't talk to me. I would be sitting there talking to
Who do you do
couple
PR
of-
for?
Yeah, exactly. And and I know at South by my first year, I was there with 2 or 3 of my guy friends, and 2 other guys came up, and instantly they just only wanted to talk to the other guys because they just assumed that I was somebody's arm candy and I had nothing to
Wow.
add. And
That's a
if
bummer.
you're in a quiet room or if you're in a conversation where you can interject, sure, like you can prove to them that
Right.
you deserve to be there. But it's a little bit exhausting to constantly have to prove to people like, hey, yep,
Yeah,
me over
I'm
here. I'm not an idiot, actually.
I'm a founder too.
So I think there's, I think
CEO,
there's,
raised $2 million.
and I'll say it's I think as a female founder, you learn very quickly at networking events to quickly slide in something like YC venture backed, because otherwise people make quick judgments that you're not worth spending time with.
Wow.
And I'm not saying this is everyone, but I think it does.
I think that's really interesting to hear and to talk about, because there are people who probably do that. I always tell people, don't underestimate anybody.
Yeah, and as people
the-
say, being underestimated can be very advantageous, but it can also drive you insane.
I can tell you as an angel investor, like, my God, you underestimate people at your peril. and you underestimate ideas at your peril. I mean, almost all of the great ideas, at some point just did not seem credible. And most of these founders who won't go on to success, they just seem difficult or unreasonable. And so
I think it's been incredibly great for the ecosystem that women like the founders of Birchbox, the founders of Rent the Runway, that they've done so well. Because I know when I first started pitching, one of the things that I used to hear occasionally was, you seem too nice to be successful.
Really?
And it's really funny because I am actually quite nice, but I don't think that actually has a bearing on how insanely determined I am.
Right.
And, I would say if you pulled people in, for example, my YC class, by the end of the program, most of them would say that my co-founders and I were the most insanely driven, partially, potentially even aggressive, focused people in our batch. But that doesn't necessarily come off in the same way it might if I were a guy, when I sit down at coffee with someone and say, hey, I'm Kathryn. Yeah, nice to meet you. Let me tell you about the Muse. And so it's also been interesting. I think the more there are women being successful, the more people look for the way that traits like determination, which are obviously critical to being successful, they may not necessarily show up in a first-time female founder in the way they might in a first-time male founder.
Yeah, that's fascinating. Like, these investors have built up their signaling for 2 decades, 3 decades, and now they're like, oh, I've never backed a female founder. The signaling of an obnoxious, arrogant guy does not apply to every person who's starting a company, specifically female founders, who may not act like complete jerks in meetings.
Oh, yeah, just
or cut people off or whatever. And some might, but...
I was going to say, I think it's much... women who are, this is a terrible terminology, but just to shorthand, an alpha male and an alpha female sometimes actually look quite different. That doesn't mean they both can't be very, very effective.
Yeah.
But women don't necessarily, they don't get rewarded certainly for some of the same behaviors. And again, I don't think it changes necessarily the underlying risk tolerance or ability to deal with obstacles, but it may change the way they appear in that first meeting.
Yeah, and for funding and stuff like that and whatever. Yeah, who's a really nice guy? Larry Page. He's a super nice guy.
Actually,
I've had many conversations with Larry and Sergey. Like, these are 2 of the nicest guys you'll meet. This is the last person you ever want to compete with. They will absolutely destroy any competitor.
And actually, I'll give you a perfect example too. It's very common when you're seed stage for a VC to say, well, have you thought about like this other idea that's not really that related? And it's kind of my upbringing, but I'll be like, even if the idea is like pretty stupid, even now and definitely for the first year or so, I'd be like, oh, that's interesting. I'll think about it. And then sometimes they would say, see, I don't think you're really committed, and I'm like, I'm just not being an asshole, okay? Your idea is stupid, but I'm not going to tell you.
Yeah, I'm just like, you're
so
stupid, and I don't want to have to explain to you why.
I was going to say, there's a little bit of this interesting thing where I remember after YC, when we were fundraising, one of the guys came back and he's like, I had this amazing VC meeting. I was up there and some guy asked a question and I was like, that's the stupidest question I've heard, yet. And he was like, instantly apologized and they gave me a term sheet. And I was thinking like,
God, I got to channel my inner jerk.
I just don't think, and maybe it'll be different, I don't think for a seed stage, early stage female founder, it would fly to ever be in a meeting and say, that's the dumbest question. Like, that just, people don't accept the same behavior. And so that may be kind of a sign of this rebel. It doesn't mean that
it's interesting.
Someone might not be thinking it.
Being interpreted wildly different based on gender. It's interesting to hear you relate these stories, and I think it's really great for you to share them on the show because you actually, as a guy, and I'm a guy, and I'm an angel investor. Like, I would not even think about that stuff because I don't actually see gender. But the fact that you are thinking about it, it's like really great for me to hear what you're going through, right? Because I think out of the last 5 people I invested in, 3 of them were female founders. Red Tricycle. Red Tricycle, and a couple of others. Who am I forgetting? Anyway, I'm seeing female founders all the time.
Yeah.
And it is interesting now that you mention it, when I talk to them about other ideas, and I talk to some male founders, I actually am thinking of specific instances where male founders would absolutely say, yeah, we thought about that, we tried it, it's stupid, it doesn't work, absolutely not. And then I actually can think of a female founder saying, yeah, do you think that's something we should consider? Or, like a much more
it's like, gracious... Oh, that's interesting. I'll look into it.
Right.
In their head, now, granted, not you, because I'm sure your ideas are great, but in a parallel situation, you can imagine that in their head, they're thinking, is this guy serious? Does he think we have not thought of that? But you may not verbalize that for a variety of different reasons.
Yeah, I'm always careful with being you have to be very careful as an angel investor when you're throwing these ideas out at founders, because you don't want them to get too many ideas or think that, oh, if I do that idea, then they'll fund me.
Then they'll fund me, yeah.
Usually you're asking or at least in this angel investor's case, and I hope in other ones, you're asking like, have you considered this or have you tried this? Because you just want to know if there is actually a result to that test.
Yeah.
Right? So like when I talked to Travis about Uber, have you thought of X? And he's like, yeah, of course, we're going to do that. Yeah. Have you thought of Y? And he's like, yeah, it's probably not a great idea.
Yeah. I remember we had an early investor in Groupon who wanted to angel invest in the Muse, and he's like, but here's what you got to do. One job every day in email. And I was like, okay, that's actually Groupon for jobs, but thanks for your input.
Wow. You see the world through Groupon glasses.
But it's funny, even if, he was very insistent, and I was just like, it's interesting. I certainly think delivering jobs through email is something that we're going to do more of in the future. It's just not my style. And for me,
Wow, now this job has gotten 10,000 applications, 9,800 of which are absolutely not qualified. Congratulations. You've now caused an even bigger problem.
And the company hates you because they don't want 10,000 applications.
No,
they want
the
50 or 5 right ones. Yeah.
These want to solve it. All right, listen, this has been great. Continued success. And everybody check out themuse.com or follow Kmin on the Twitter, Kmin. I'm guessing you're the Muse on Twitter as well, or Daily Muse on.
Yeah, we're at Daily Muse on Twitter.
Oh, right, for your daily email alerts.
Exactly.
Everybody follow Daily Muse, and if you're a company, man, the pages look beautiful. I'm thinking about, wow, I got all my positions filled right now, but that is, I actually have a company that I'm an advisor to, called Raise.com. They're out of Chicago. It's a really great company, and I was just having a conversation last month with the founder about how to let people know how awesome a place it is to work, and this would be the perfect solution. I'm going to do an intro for you guys. Because it would be great, because he's in Chicago, and people are like,
and the thing is,
he's got to hire people away from like traditional Chicago companies.
And you can also move people from New York or San Francisco or Boston or LA if they know what they're moving for. But it's harder to do that if you can't tell them, like, this is why it's so amazing that you should consider moving cities.
Do you have a problem where people just look at the site, see your best practices, and then do it themselves on their site?
Of course, but no one ever succeeds.
They don't. They just do like 80% of it or whatever.
Here's the thing. Going back to, I said we're operationally excellent.
Yeah.
It's really easy to put up a site that kind of looks like it does what we do, but you will never get 1.5 million users a month. In the time we have, you will never have the engagement. People don't want to bother with the operational processes behind it. They don't want to bother with the content. Going back, content it's just not sexy, but it's really, really effective.
It's effective and it's a grind.
Yeah, and so I would say we have various clones popping up all the time.
Oh, do you really? Yeah.
Yeah,
what a
but
disaster.
I look at them once, I boomerang them out 2 months, and they're usually dead. So.
Oh, you boomerang them? That's like that email
it's
tool?
a Gmail plugin. I am addicted to it, first of all.
I have people in my team who are addicted to it. I'm looking at right now.
I say it's perfect for this because I'm saying, okay, well, if this is still interesting, I'm going to check on it on August 17th. And it'll either be interesting or it'll be dead.
I gotta reinstall Boomerang. It's a cool little. I have people who do that with me, who work for me, and they just boomerang every single thing. And I don't respond to email. I'm just like, it's too many emails. It's like, hit me in the hip chat. I'm too busy. All right, and thanks to our sponsors. Thanks to WeWork. Thanks to the team, Jacob, for coming all the way out to the East Coast. How was your first trip? You had a good time? First trip in New York was good? All right, awesome, great. Luke and Brandon for keeping the lights on, DeMont as well. Producer Gina, I'm going to miss you. Continued success in your career. Producer Jade, I'm going to miss you as well. Hold down the fort in L.A., and congratulations to Brandon and Jackie for joining the team up in San Francisco. Emily, you're always crushing it on the events. I appreciate that immensely. Flawless event at the Launch Beacon Conference. You did a great job. And Andrew on the Launch Ticker, my silent soldier, keeping me informed of everything. Do appreciate it. You can follow me at Jason, and you can follow the show at TWI Startups. You can go to the website, thisweekatstartups.com. Go to the Muse. It's awesome. Bye.